Hello and welcome to the FT debate, in which Financial Times commentators go head-to-head on pressing issues. Up for discussion today is the proposal: should the UK government save the British steel industry? With me is Jonathan Guthrie, the FT City editor, who believes the government should not be looking to nationalise the plants. Against him is Giles Wilkes, a writer on the FT's Lex column who, in another life, was a special advisor to Vince Cable, the former business secretary. He joins Mr. Cable in believing that the industry can be saved with a little help from the government. Welcome. You'll now have 1 minute to make your cases and then have the opportunity to question each other. So Jonathan, it's your turn first. You have 60 seconds to argue why the British steel industry should not be nationalised.
The government should not try to save the British steel industry because it does not have the ability to do so. It doesn't have the ability to push water uphill either. Parts of the British steel industry are in severe trouble because energy costs are high, because sites are uncompetitive, and also because China is dumping steel on the world market. The government has no ability or will to change any of those things. What the government may try to do is keep the industry going for a little while by paying workers. The argument there is that they might otherwise drift off to other jobs. But in that case, why not let them do so? Giles is probably too young to remember British Steel and British Leyland in the 70s and 80s. I'm old enough to remember them, and I remember that they mostly lost money.
I have to stop you there, Jonathan. You've hit your 60 seconds. Thank you very much. Giles, it's now your turn. You have 60 seconds to get on the soapbox and tell us why the government should help the British steel industry.
Most government intervention in industry is a disaster, as Jonathan correctly remembers. However, in certain circumstances, it makes more sense to get involved and prevent an even worse disaster than just allow it to unfold. And the people of Wales probably know this better than anyone. The estimated job losses from Tata closing down over there, something like 40,000 people. So even if they cost £5,000 each, that's going to be £200 million of cost to the exchequer in terms of support and unemployment. That's one reason. Another is the strategic potential of steel itself. Steel is an essential feedstock item for all sorts of other parts of the manufacturing chain. We might find ourselves in a position where we need that steel produced locally to high quality, and suddenly we're having to get it overseas in future. A third one is purely speculative. We're going through a unique period of weakness in the global economy. If this picks up and in a couple of years' time the margin on steel has returned, we'll be feeling huge regret that we allowed tens of thousands of jobs to go just because we believed in certain laissez-faire principles.
And that's your time. Thank you very much, Giles. Now, if you'd like to turn to face one another, you'll now have the opportunity to question each other on the British steel industry. So, Jonathan, what would you like to ask Giles?
So, Giles, if I understand you correctly, your essential idea is that the government should gamble with taxpayers' money on commodity prices. Is that really a good idea?
The government is always gambling with taxpayers' money. The government gambles when it gives away this money in corporate tax cuts that don't encourage investment, or income tax cuts that don't make much difference to the employment market. So it's always dealing with uncertainty. In this case, it's got a very well-defined problem that it can see the costs to. So sure, it's a gamble.
But it can see the costs, but it can't see at the moment, but it can't see how they might mount up over an extended period of time. Because if the idea is that the government owns steel for a while until it can sell it, what surely most potential buyers will do is hang back and wait for administration so they can pick up assets cheap, unencumbered by things like pensions.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen to those pension funds, but it's an important consideration that if you own this thing, we're going to have the cost of those pension funds anyway. One might as well try and turn this into a profitable outfit that can maybe pay for those pension costs.
Using the kind of expertise that we saw deployed by Labour governments and some Conservative ones during the 60s and 70s? British Steel, British Leyland, they were money pits.
I'm just going to interrupt and say, Giles, would you like to ask a question to Jonathan now to give him a chance to respond?
We see what happens when you talk about the 60s and 70s. We saw what followed that in the 80s when people said, I'll tell you what, let's just see what happens when the gales of the free market deal with these places. The social costs are still there. The high sickness rates, the fact that these places have never got going again. We know what happens when people are not supported. So what would you actually do for Wales if it found that it had an extra 30 or 40,000 unemployed and far lower incomes to deal with it?
Well, There are a whole lot of support schemes that can be introduced. Those have to be done quite cleverly, I think, and even there you're trying to back winners. What happened at MG Rove, which I followed very closely because I was in Birmingham at the time, was a very big retraining scheme.
Yeah.
Overall, you tended to see
But
job rates
why back an
fell.
unknown winner like this? There's new schemes that might somehow work against something that is known to employ people
Okay,
quite well. And is,
so you'd like to back an unknown winner against a known loser? That doesn't seem to me to be a particularly sensible idea.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. I'm sure we could go on for this for a long time, but thank you very much, Jonathan Guthrie and Giles Wilkes. So is this the end of steel production in Britain? Find out more at ft.com. Thank you for watching.